We must all get ready now.
Mr. Brackett, I'm sorry, Mr. Brackett.
Oh, I didn't mean to startle you.
That's all right.
You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
Well, it's officially spooky season here on the channel, so I think it'd be appropriate to talk briefly about
Halloween.
I think we are all aware that the original Halloween is a cultural cornerstone of the horror genre. And why not? It kickstarted the slasher boom of the early 80s. It was the most profitable film of its time based on its budget. It launched the career of Jamie Lee Curtis and John Carpenter and introduced the world to the boogeyman himself, Michael Myers, a living embodiment of pure evil. John Carpenter and Deborah Hill were able to tap into a cultural fear that both delighted and terrified audiences of the late 70s. It's a movie that, despite its similarities to critical punching bags like Friday the 13th, is well beloved and regarded as a classic in suspense and horror, much like its main inspiration, Psycho.
And a good example of that is the fact that both of us gave favorable reviews to a very scary 1978 horror film named Halloween.
There are a lot of different movies that people claim are inspirations for this seminal film. There are arguments to be made that Black Christmas, a horror classic in its own right, heavily influenced Halloween. The argument being that since the film's events take place around a holiday and it contains a voyeuristic point of view of the killer, it in some way must have inspired Halloween. Which I won't disagree with entirely. The holiday theme makes sense as an inspiration, but voyeurism is a theme present in a lot of John Carpenter's work predating even Black Christmas. His student film, Captain Voyeur, quite literally has the same kind of shots that Halloween would use, and these are much closer than the frantic POV shots in Black Christmas. No, this theme of watching unsuspecting people from a distance is most likely picked up from the works of Alfred Hitchcock. Of course it's in Psycho, but it's also in movies like Rear Window. Psycho is deep within the DNA of Halloween, from the types of shots present in the film, to the weapon's choice of the killer, to the characters' names, to the use of the music. The music for these films are used in very similar ways. The scores are creepy and unnerving, giving the impression that something is deeply wrong even when nothing particularly spectacular is happening on screen. Do you think the scenes involving Dr. Loomis forewarning the police would be as effective if it weren't for this score?
I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face, and
these pieces of acting and writing are elevated because of the music, just like in Psycho when Marion and Norman are having dinner.
She just goes a little mad sometimes. We all go a little mad sometimes.
The music guides the unnerving feeling of darkness and punctuates acts of violence and jump scares in a very similar way. So much so that Scream would use the music to punctuate a scene quite dramatically 20 years later.
Listen up. They found Principal Henry dead. He was gutted and hung from the goalpost on the football field.
This helped Halloween stand out in comparison to other slasher and exploitation films of the decade. Instead of gritty, guerrilla-style filmmaking with diegetic music and extreme violence, this film is shrouded in shadow. A lot of on-screen violence is distorted or skewed. There's more implied violence through framing than gory money shots. That's not to say that Halloween is excellent because of its Psycho influence. There is more to it than that. There are a couple of ideas presented in Halloween that make it stand out as an icon of its own. One being switching the types of victims from runaway crooks and private investigators to normal teenagers minding their own business. It's the fear that even in your own home, where you should be safe from freaks and creeps, you just might not be. In Psycho and other films of that time like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Last House on the Left, and The Hills Have Eyes, the characters make the mistake of visiting a dangerous place and not noticing the monsters lurking within.
I'm gonna kill your kids for that.
Sally, I hear something. Stop. Stop.
In Halloween, Michael singles out the main characters. It could have been anyone. They are truly just unlucky enough to have caught his eye. Even when Laurie knows something is deeply wrong, she keeps second guessing herself because of where they live. Why would somebody want to do them any harm? They live in suburbia, a place where you shouldn't have to worry about random serial killers. And speaking of killers, of course the main reason why the film is a horror classic is because of the shape himself, Michael Myers. The concept of a serial killer that won't die not only freaked out audiences at the time, but would be borrowed by literally every other prominent slasher villain afterwards. Michael's concept is fascinating as well. A man so far gone, they begin to exhibit supernatural power. I think it's said best here in the documentary on John Carpenter's work.
But the reason that Halloween works is because he's not actually even human. That at the beginning, Michael is a child. By the time he comes back, he's the shape. He's not a person anymore. So what Carpenter is doing there with his co-writer is turning madness into the supernatural thing, because Michael is so crazy, he actually ceases to be human and he becomes, this immortal boogeyman.
The idea of a man whose descent into madness is so great that they become a superhuman agent of evil, fully capable of taking bullets, stabbings, and literal explosions and getting up and continuing their pursuit astounds me even today. He'll just get back up in the most unnerving way possible too. This move is so effective, The Undertaker would borrow it. You practically have a supervillain as your antagonist, in a world where there are no superheroes. The only real threat towards Michael is his doctor, who is also quite literally out of his mind.
I shot him 6 times. I shot him in the heart. The tribe. One of their number was butchered. This is the wake.
10-4, Ramsey.
Will you put that thing away?
Dr. Loomis acts as a sort of harbinger of doom for Michael. Every one of his monologues delivered by Donald Pleasance is deeply unnerving.
I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
Michael in this mask drifts through the shadows as an imitation of man itself, like a walking mockery of it. His mask is deep within the trenches of the uncanny valley. It's terrifying. It's no surprise why audiences gravitated towards the character in this film. I love the first film so much that it's hard to look at the sequels in the same vein. I like Halloween 2 a lot, I watched it just as much as the original, but it's always going to be tainted by the sister reveal, which I agree takes a lot away from the mystique.
That girl, that Strode girl, that's Michael Myers' sister.
They really weren't able to recapture it until the recent trilogy, which started off strong, but sort of lost its way a bit. I don't really like the concept of Michael taking on a whole angry mob and somehow killing the whole mob. It's just too silly for me to even take remotely seriously. I mean, we're just leaning fully into supervillain territory now. It's just ridiculous. And the less said about Halloween Ends, the better. What a fiasco. The Halloween franchise has a lot of ups and downs, but hey, it's an institution of horror, and without it, the horror genre would look completely different.
We must all get ready now.
Facility of plastic.